G'day guys, welcome to this episode of the Aussie English Podcast. I have thrown an introduction onto this episode because I want to give you a swear warning. So in this episode, I sit down with Hugo from Ozueiros Gringos, where they are a group of two Australian guys who teach Brazilians English. So these guys speak Portuguese. They've spent time over there, but we had a rather laid-back, relaxed conversation that does include a little bit of swearing. So I just wanted to let you know so that if you are not interested in listening to a conversation where I drop the odd S-bomb or F-bomb, then skip this episode, listen to some others. If, on the other hand, you would like to hear how Australians speak to one another more naturally in a very informal kind of environment, then this is going to be the interview for you. So sit back, relax, let's get into it. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have a special episode for you guys where I'm going to be chatting to Hugo Groom about how on earth you learnt Brazilian Portuguese to such a level, and how Ozueiros Brasileiros, or Ozueiros Gringos, how Ozueiros Gringos started. So man, introduce yourself. How did you end up here today?
All right, here we go. So, long story short, essentially end of my first year of university, I met some Brazilians. One was doing home stay at my mate's place. Pretty funny because I'm now better mates with the Brazilian than I am with my Aussie childhood friend, but whatever. Met him, he told me there'd be a bunch of Brazilians living on my street. Met them, fell in love with the culture straight away, the musicality, the fun, the good vibe. One thing led to another. Initially it was just a bit of a muck around in summer. Suddenly decided I wanted to learn the language. After a year, got pretty decent, made some videos that went viral, and then finished university, spent a year in Brazil, absolutely loved it. And then I sort of dropped off for a bit, focused on other things, but it was always going to parties and everything. And then I met Simon, who was just a bit younger, who was getting into it himself, and he said he lived with me for a month, and he said, let's do it. So at the moment we're on a Christmas hiatus, just sort of wondering what our plans are for the next year, but we joined forces to make videos, and yeah, we went on SBS Radio, we did a lot of things together, and we just love Brazilian culture. It's a lot of fun now.
Where did you end up over in Brazil?
So I started, well, it was pretty exciting actually. I started off in Rio with a few mates, then I went down to São Paulo. I love sertanejo music.
Yep.
Yeah, you know sertanejo. And then I traveled all around Brazil. I went to the Amazon, I went south, I went to Goiânia, I went northeast. I ended up on the morning show in Rio on Fátima Bernardes. So
was that before or after learning Portuguese to fluency?
That was after. I was a bit disappointed because she kept asking me some very basic gringo questions, and I thought, come on, I already speak the language. Yeah.
Well, what kind of questions was she asking you?
Oh, just like, what does this mean? And like, just very basic, like I was a dumb gringo. I mean, fair enough, but yeah, not a problem, but I was sort of...
Did she ask you this one?
No, yeah, no, learned that one. Yeah,
Sorry, for those of you who can't see, we're doing sort of rude symbols with the hands, so...
Yeah, no, so it was, yeah. And, no, I had an absolute ball. So now I sort of live this, as Australian as I am, I live a double life, I'd say.
So what was the biggest shock for you going over to Brazil, and what was the process of learning the language and the culture when you went over there? Had you any experience to it prior to landing there in Brazil, or you just sort of, practiced a bit at home and then went over, did some Duolingo?
Well, to be honest, is my camera gone here or something?
No, I can see it.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Yeah. Okay, to be honest, I was already quite fluent before I got there, but it was more the cultural shock which got me. So I've realised that Brazil and Australia is a completely different cup of tea. Brazilians change here. They're a bit different. I think you see, to be blatantly honest, I mean, controversial, I think you see the best of Brazil and Australia. You have the best of both worlds.
So how do they change when they get here? I need to ask my wife this. I'll have to be like, Kel, okay. When I take you back to Brazil, what's going to happen?
So am I allowed to be honest?
Man, go to town. I'm sure that even the Brazilians listening are going to want to hear the truth. So you just be as honest as you want.
What happens obviously Brazil is a developing country with a huge social difference.
Yep.
what happens in those sort of with huge social divides is people who have a lot of money can often be quite snobbish, and a lot of people, basic education and politeness sometimes goes astray because people are used to sort of, how would I say, crapping on each other in a way. And whereas we don't realize sometimes a lot of Australians complain, but what's beautiful about our country is the way that, even though obviously there are differences, but the way we treat each other is very egalitarian.
I'm always saying that to people. I'm like, when you come over here, you need to learn the slang. You need to sort of dive in a bit and be informal to kind of be more accepted. The more formal you are, it's kind of like you're putting up walls and barriers and it feels uncomfortable.
I agree. And what I noticed in Brazil was that a lot of people were caring about image, how they're seen, how much money and what they can afford. And for me, as just a young Aussie bloke who I actually went to a private school here, the idea of
me too.
Showing off, the idea of showing off a shirt or something seems absolutely stupid. Whereas in developing countries and places like Brazil, it's great. However, that Brazilian vibe, that sense of fun, sometimes I wish my Aussie mates had that.
Yeah.
And they don't. So for me, it's the best of both worlds you find in Australia.
So did you find yourself getting used to that after a while and becoming a bit more snobbish and wanting to show off a bit after you've been in Brazil for a while?
To be honest, I went the opposite. I actually got a bit pissed off with it because I thought, geez, what's happened to all the Brazilians I met in? I mean, I absolutely had a ball, but sometimes I think, why did you just throw that piece of rubbish on the ground? Controversial point. Why are you so religious? Please relax. And after a while, that actually started to grind on me. It really grounded on me. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. I've caused a lot of issues here on these sort of points, but you just sort of realize a lot of differences, and I absolutely love certain aspects of the culture. In fact, most of it I do, but there's sometimes when I go, oh, geez. And vice versa with Australian culture too. I just think, I was in Brazil and I thought, wow, people here when they get drunk kiss each other and hug each other and don't bash each other. What
in Brazil?
Yeah, it's fantastic, whereas here we're all we can't even have a night out here in Sydney without fear of someone bottling, it's stupid. So it all depends. It's all, what I thought Brazil was going to be this paradise. It is a fantastic place, but honestly, I probably, in my mind, it was some dream world.
Well, I think that's the same anywhere. That's the same anywhere, right? Like anytime you've never been to a place, you sort of have an idea in your head. And I think too, the problem with Australia and the migrants we meet, I think wherever they've come from, they always tend to be the best of the batch. Right? They always tend to be the creme de la creme, the best of them. And so you think, oh, everyone's like this. Everyone's really, friendly and loving and outgoing.
Everyone was telling me, but in your mind, when everyone's treating you fantastically at barbecues, you have Brazilian girlfriends, you're playing music, you're having a great time, it's very hard to accept that there might be issues.
Well, they probably have that in reverse, right? Where they meet Australians over there and they're like, oh, these guys are so, awesome and down to earth. And then they come to Australia and they're like, oh my gosh, there's all sorts here.
To make friends at times and everything. I mean, they think we're all blonde surfers or whatever, just for the beach. And that's fair enough. Same sort of thing. You know what I mean? So yeah, obviously been quite honest in the interview, but I've absolutely loved it. It's sort of this passion. I've just gotten in a relationship now, but sort of been the first sort of relationship that's never died for me.
With a Brazilian?
Yeah, it's always been strong.
Awesome.
She's never left me, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant. So what's the hardest thing about being in a relationship with a Brazilian? And obviously you and I can probably tell a few stories, good and bad.
Okay. My girlfriend at the moment is extremely chill, I must say. She's fantastic. However, there are some little cultural differences, like, for example, in Australian culture, posting a mooning, stuff like that, it's not a big deal, whereas I was going to post on Instagram and I copped a hiding, saying, how dare you show your ass to anyone else? Or just little things, or if I'm too nice sometimes, I'll say, hey, to other girls or whatever, sometimes I cop a little, what are you doing? I think I was just being nice, but I can understand how that may come across as me being a bit cheeky.
But you need to take that as a compliment, because that means she sees other people as a threat because you're such a high quality husband or boyfriend, right?
I absolutely agree with you. Now,
there's a fine line though. You got to balance that fine line of you want other people to want you, but not too much.
Exactly. No, I like to keep a little bit of jealousy healthy, just so she knows,
Well, she's not going to want to be with someone who every time they try and talk to a woman, the woman runs, right? Or it's like, no way.
Exactly. No, I agree with you, Pete. And am I allowed to ask him to interview about your story?
I don't know. Mine was interesting. So I met her online through Aussie English, teaching English, and we just hit it off chatting, and she was just, I think, just no bullshit. Just didn't take any shit, had a good sense of humor, and is still like that now. And, you know, isn't afraid to sort of give me a slap if I do something wrong. And I think there was a bit of a cultural difference. And I think too that the language really drew me in. I'd learned a little bit because I did jiu-jitsu before meeting Kel. So I knew a bit of Brazilian Portuguese, but before probably this year, I didn't speak it fluently, at least to have conversations all day with other Brazilians. But I love that aspect of it, and having the opportunity now. She's pregnant, 4 months pregnant, to have a kid.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But to have a kid that we'll be able to raise with 2 languages, that aspect of it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So are you sort of in the same boat now that you've learned a foreign language and have obviously had relationships with foreigners? Do you think you'll ever go back to Aussies? If God forbid anything ended currently?
Okay, to be honest, sorry, I don't know what sort of barriers I have to put up in the interview, but...
Man, just be you. These people most of the people listening are obviously wanting to learn about the culture. They want to know about everything, so...
firstly, to be blatantly honest, I realised that I actually, despite being a very white guy myself, I don't dig white chicks. It's like my girlfriend at the moment has a, slightly darker skin, and I just love it.
Yeah.
And I always tell her, please, just get as much sun as you like. You know what I mean?
Do you think, is that a grass on the other side is greener? The grass is always greener, where it's like, okay, I was...
You grow up with everyone being the same in Brazil. I know that white skin and everything, blue eyes, whatever's very prized over there because it's different. But for me, I really like coffee with milk, so to speak. And also I love the sort of musicality, the fun, that sense of excitement. To be honest, it's been a while since I've gone back to the origins, so to speak. So I've always been
It's very weird, isn't it? I mean, and as an Australian too, who's dated people from overseas, I dated French people and Spanish people and then Brazilians, and you realize how much more sort of in touch they are with their sexuality, and they're much more blunt and open, I think, than a lot of Westerners. And that's a bit of a shock quite a bit to quite a lot of people.
I completely agree with you there, Pete, because what I noticed was, I feel like, God, this could be very controversial, but I feel like we have actually a very prunish sexual culture. I don't know about Melbourne, in Sydney, where it's almost frowned upon to sort of make a move and be upfront sometimes, when obviously you've got to have, there's a fine line. You've always got to be respectful. But I feel like I never learned how to talk to a girl. And
it's gone crazy, right? With social justice warriors and political correctness these days, with anything can be seen, anything now that can be interpreted as sexual harassment or whatever it's always the worst side of the story is assumed. And so I think a lot of men these days are afraid to do any of that.
Well, that's what I look at a lot of my friends, and the girl's clearly keen on them and they don't make a move. And I'm like, man, if she says no, just bugger off. And
that's it. Leave her alone.
Yeah, just leave her alone and go away.
But I think a lot of guys now are just afraid of coming off as, being a misogynist or whatever, and they are afraid to make the first move. But then ironically, you meet people who, like my wife Kel from Brazil, and they were like, if you had never made the first move, there was no way I would have gone there. You are the one who had to get off your ass and, say good day and get into it and pursue me. I'm not chasing you kind of attitude. And you sort of that is how it sort of should be.
Because I was actually very slow. I remember my first Brazilian girl, well, sort of semi-girlfriend when I was 19, she actually complained. She said, geez, you were the hardest and slowest dude ever. Because it took me 3 nights to get me. And because I was clueless. And then obviously it took me a couple of years, and after a couple of years I sort of learnt how to do it. And then I learnt, look, always treat respect, and if the person just says no, you say, I'm very sorry, I hope you have a lovely night, and move on. You know what I mean? Simple as that. Always respectful, but have a crack.
Exactly.
Obviously, grab someone, but you said, look, I thought you were really beautiful, and
you got to be forthright, right? You got to be respectful and forthright, and you usually don't go wrong. But that's a good point, I guess, for anyone who's come over to Australia and is wanting to meet Australian women or even Australian guys. They're probably going to have to juggle with that kind of thing, where the Australian women are probably not used to men just coming up to them and being incredibly blunt. Like, I think I've heard of a few women saying, geez, Brazilian dudes are full on, but vice versa. If you see a guy who sort of seems to like you, but seems to be too afraid to, it doesn't mean that he doesn't want to, ask you out or whatever.
Yeah.
But he needs...
I'm learning now. This Brazilian friend of mine, she was just messaging me 10 minutes ago asking, I'm with this dude and what's going on? He's not making a move. It's I said, just grab his shoulder, have a crack.
That's it.
You're pretty gonna know.
I think the physical contact's a big thing. You have to break down those barriers and joke around with them, touch them on the shoulder, and then you see it sort of develop. But yeah, it is pretty funny how kind of you notice once you start learning about other cultures, you notice how different Australia is or Western culture is, and yeah, how not necessarily, I don't know if I'd say really prude, but I would say kind of naive quite often, right?
Yeah, that's what I feel like. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to complain, but I feel like compared to a lot of cultures, I didn't have I didn't grow up in like a sexually active sort of, where I was encouraged to go out with your mates and with the girls and hook up with each other. I mean, I wish that had been the case, honestly. And I'm very happy to have. And it was funny because my girlfriend, before she became my girlfriend, actually used to help me with the girls. So it kind of made a funny story. But I always let her know. I said, look, when I do meet you personally, I think I'm gonna get you. And she said, yeah, good luck. And I was like, sorry.
But that's it. That's the cat and mouse thing, right? That's the cat and mouse chase.
Yeah, so she lives in Brisbane, so that's why she had time to sort of build up the defences.
Man, it's these Brazilians that end up in Queensland. Kel, my wife was in Townsville before moving down here. So yeah, it's funny how that happens. How did you learn Portuguese? Tell me that story.
So I learned French at school.
Oh man, you sound like me.
Yeah, I love it. So I learned French at school, but I'd gone off French. I did a French exchange. And I had some good mates there, but I went to a bit of a snobby part of France and I sort of lost the love of it a bit. You know what I mean? I got over having wines in turtlenecks and...
Was this in the north? Was this in the north?
Yeah, this was, I was obviously hindsight's great, but I wish I'd had a different experience and someone turned me off it. And obviously I always loved languages. I did love different cultures. And then I just started hanging out with the Brazilians and I thought, all right, since they're a big group of them, no one really cares about speaking English, which is good for me. I'm going to learn the language. So every day I would just ask, how do I say I want? I go and I'd use what I learned in French to have age, things like that. And I just kept learning. And then I noticed after about 8 months, one day it just clicked. And suddenly, sorry, my screen's mucking around here.
You're good.
And then I noticed after 8 months I could understand what everyone was saying, and then it was never a chore for me. It was always fun because Brazilians love their emotional posts, and I was reading, I learned how to read and write from them, and I love romantic music. It's weird being an Aussie guy, but I was born a dramatic romantic bugger, and I just listen to sertanejo 24/7. Even one of the criteria I told my girlfriend was, look, if you don't like sertanejo, I don't think it's going to happen. And lucky she's from the country and she loves it, so she deals with me. But that's the only music I listen to. So before I knew how to say what an apple, it was funny. It took me 2 years because I never had a lesson. It took 2 years to learn how to say an apple in Portuguese. Whereas I could talk about politics, I could talk about the night out perfectly, but 2 years I didn't know what an apple was because I just never need to learn. I never need to learn what an apple was.
I always seem to notice that with Kel. We're always talking Portuguese at home. I pretty much am just like in the house, and I to the detriment of her English, because she's always like, oh, we speak Portuguese, and I'm like, yeah, because we've got a kid on the way, and I'm trying to get as high a level as I can, not having anyone else to talk to.
It helps.
Yeah, exactly. But all we end up talking about is the same stuff. Do you want to get lunch? Do you want to clean the dishes? Do you want me to go out and buy this? And it's the same language all the time. So how did you develop your language without going to Brazil, or like at home? Was it just through conversations and interactions, or did you study?
It's funny because a lot of people say, I'd love to think highly of myself and say I was some amazing, maybe I know I have a knack for language. However, I'd love to brag about it, but really you don't need to go to Brazil to learn Portuguese because there are thousands of Brazilians here. They're a very warm culture. So honestly, I was living in Brazil here. Yep. You know what I mean? Because I was going to Brazilian parties, everyone was speaking Portuguese. I was exposed to the Portuguese 24/7. So it was never, you know what I mean? I never went out of my way. Whereas at the moment I'm trying to learn Spanish and I recently came back from Madrid. But for me, it's because I'm not in the community, it's an effort. It is a chore for me to maintain it.
So, but that's what I was going to ask. So for people listening to this podcast who are learning English and they're living in their countries, Brazil, Indonesia, wherever it is, they're home without that many. I mean, there'll be English speakers around, but they may not come into contact with them that often. What can they do in order to level up their English? What advice would you give someone asking you that?
The good thing about English is it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'd be watching TV shows with subtitles. I'd be listening to the songs, just media, reading articles. And honestly, the key to learning a language is it should never be, I have to learn this language. It's not a chore. Learning a language is because you want to learn, you want to communicate. So for me, it's finding an interest. Mine was honestly romantic music. And that's what kept me going in Portuguese. And the parties and the fun. Whereas, if you I don't know, if you like cars, I don't know, whatever your interest, find that, and I guarantee you that's going to lead to English somehow.
So how did you go did you ever try and find resources for learning Portuguese? Because I found after French, doing that at school and then studying that more recently a few years ago, there is a plethora of material, despite it being only, whatever it is, 100 million people in the world who speak French. And yet Portuguese, there's 270 million people across the world who speak it. And I swear there's nothing. There is like a few textbooks.
You're right. French is it was the world language 100 and something years ago, but it's very prestigious.
Yeah.
Whereas Portuguese is and Brazilian Portuguese is sort of hybrid in itself. And only, I obviously give Portuguese classes to gringos, to boyfriends and girlfriends.
Yeah.
And it's a real struggle to find material sometimes.
Yeah. So what do you suggest if someone's wanting to learn things like grammar and everything like that? If they're finding it hard to find the material, maybe they can't afford them, is there other sort of ways to get around that? Or you would just say, just dive in, don't worry about grammar as much, practice it,
Honestly, the grammar comes with the interest. For me, that was, I'd want to say the party was good, and I asked, how do I say was? And you just go from that. Honestly, I really don't, a lot of people ask me what material, but I think that deters.
Yeah. It
actually impedes learning. So what I do is always finding interest, and from there everything stems. So what I was doing was because I'm a bit of a perfectionist in some ways, I still make mistakes, I laugh at them, but I don't like to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because my level's good enough now that I actually seem like an idiot when I make, whereas it's cute when you're first learning.
I'm still at that stage where I say, eu quero comer pau, and she'll be like, which pau in this case means, a rude word for penis.
At that stage, you've got to enjoy, you can enjoy it. Whereas for me now, since I'm at quite a high level with it, when I make a mistake, everyone's like, geez, that was dumb.
Yeah.
So So what I used to do was I always used to double check, because I had so many I popped them and said, hey mate, could you please double check this for me before I post it? And just doing that repetitively all the time, I just didn't make mistakes.
Well, it's like it's like a how would you say? It's kind of like it's a self-cleaning process, right? You're constantly carving away the fat and getting better and better and better. And Kel's always doing that with me. She's always like, can I say this? To the point where I'm like, Kel, it's going to be perfect. Stop asking me. And it's like, it's really funny when I get frustrated with her because she's, too good, and I forget the fact that it's a second language. It's almost like, geez, you should take that as a sign. Don't get angry at me for getting angry at you, but take it as a sign of, I'm holding you to the same standards any other English speakers being held to.
I agree with you. So you've only been learning for how long?
Well, I did it a few years ago, maybe 2014. I started fiddling around with Duolingo because I was doing exactly. I was doing jiu-jitsu and just met. All of a sudden, never knew any Brazilians. Started doing jiu-jitsu in the city, and every day I'd bump into 5 or 10 of them. And so I was just like, okay. And I'd been studying French for a year or so because I was like, what, screw this. I'm just going to finally get to fluency in this bloody language that I studied for 6 years at school, and was just doing that online again through, Speaky and a few other websites where you could have, you could kind of meet partners and trade time learning English and French. And then, just started learning it. But, tried doing the Duolingo and like books and everything, but just got bored. And then with Kel, once I had a girlfriend that I was chatting to every day, I would just be like, just constantly be instigating, speaking in Portuguese with her, and almost getting annoyed if she switches to English, because she'll often forget words. She'll be like, she'll say a sentence and then just throw English words in there, and I'll be like, don't do that. Just think for a moment.
I agree with you. What I noticed was I've noticed Brazilians are actually like, the analogy I use, the metaphor I use, is that they're like vampires. In every vampire movie, you notice once the guy discovers the vampire world, there are millions of them. I'm like that. You don't know they're there, but once you meet one, you meet a million Brazilians. It's like a vampire. It's like Blade.
You get sucked in, right?
Yeah, you're sucked in, and then suddenly they appear every restaurant, every function, every day you're walking on the street, there's a Brazilian. And and it's great. So it's a fantastic world to be involved in. And yeah, you're right. It's just sort of focus on the learning, as in just what you've got to do is a lot of people seem to, and a lot of Brazilians have this, they seem to, obviously we have the luxury of English being the world language in that way, so we don't have to worry about it. But
I think it's a gift and a curse though, right? It's a gift and a curse, because if you want to learn another language, no matter which language you pick, there's almost certain to be less resources or less movies or less music, right?
Oh, exactly. But in terms of, we don't feel the pressure.
Yeah.
Like, I have to learn this, where, it's more of a pursuit, a bit of fun. Whereas a lot of Brazilians have issues. They get worried about being judged. And I think honestly, the way I learned Portuguese was taking the piss out of myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Like and I'm going to make that funny. And yeah, at the start I used that and girls loved it. I thought, how can if I'm making myself look like an idiot, what benefit? And I thought, at least people find me funny.
And what are other people going to say, right? If you're making yourself look like an idiot, what else can others say?
Exactly. So, if you're taking the piss out of yourself, people will love that. Whereas if you take yourself seriously and then make a stupid error, you look like an idiot.
Yeah.
So that's what I always say.
How do you manage the relationship with regards to languages? If you're both native speakers of different languages, do you switch between them on different days? Do you just focus on one? Is one of you improving a lot more than the other one is at the moment in one area? Like, how do you manage it?
To be honest with you, I'd love to I know obviously there's a language now, I'd love to say that no, we're practicing 50-50, but what's happening is that because I sort of speak Portuguese to the level almost sort of native, people don't even try to speak English with me. And to be honest, I don't actually know. I know this is terrible. I've been seeing my girlfriend for 7 months, but we've been official for 1 month. I've heard her speak English 3 times.
No kidding.
I don't actually know what her level of English is, to be blatantly honest. And I know that's terrible. She said to me recently, she said, maybe we should practice. I said, sure. And no, I'm honestly, it'd be very selfish for me not to say it, but it is like two Brazilians speaking, because I speak it so often, but I'm more than happy to help and I will help. But I remember in the first one, I had not a girlfriend, it's close to when I was 19, 6 years ago, and she didn't like it. I don't know if I should, this is bad
I can always edit it out.
No, she had a bit of an ego, and she's like, I lived in America, blah, blah, blah. But to be honest, she'd make a lot of silly mistakes. And I used to make fun of her, of course, because, the Australian thing, if you're going to think highly of yourself, you've got to walk the walk, you know what I mean?
Well, can you talk about that for a sec? What's the deal with Australians and ragging on each other, giving each other shit? Why do we do that? And how do you sort of avoid it or attract it in that case? Because this is something I always get asked about, and it's sometimes hard to answer.
I actually did research on it to wonder why. It comes from that convict thing of everyone not liking people above us. But I obviously think just like political correctness goes a bit out of control. And I noticed a lot of people, especially, I remember it was with my own thing. I went to I lived in that private school bubble. And then when I came, suddenly everyone thought it was funny when I started hanging out with Brazilians. But then they saw the good looking girls in the photos suddenly started attacking me. And I thought, hold up. And then people would be like, why don't you speak English? Well, and I say, sorry, I actually beat you in the year 12 test, but whatever. And no, but I remember for a while, it's amazing how people, from having a laugh to, you're a dickhead, you're a dog, blah, blah, blah. And I think, no, you're just jealous. So I think sometimes it is it's a cultural thing, that tall poppy syndrome.
Yep.
Sometimes it's good, because I also think you're a tool as well. If you've got to drive around in a nice car just to show you could get I think you're a tool. But sometimes if someone's doing well for themselves and happy about and obviously not showing off in a stupid way, but if they're generally happy and they're living their life, I think who are you to attack that person out of your own insecurity? So I just say, to be honest, I've developed pretty thick skin now, so I just have a laugh and I go, sorry. Look at you look a bit boring. But it doesn't happen.
I think it's one of those things too, right, where obviously we were all convicts and on the same level. We're all prisoners, we're all slaves. And I think it would have been the case of any time someone tries to step up and say, I'm better than everyone else, everyone's like, wait a second, just remember, you're one of us. Pull them back down.
I think it just came from that. We didn't like authority or anything like that. And it was simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of my friends, I remember going to jiu-jitsu when I first started, and they were always hanging shit on me. They were always teasing me, and I was always like, guys, what's your issue? And that's an ignorant question coming from me. And they were like, dude, we wouldn't tease you if we didn't like you. So we wouldn't even talk to you. So I was always saying that to some of my friends. You can tell when people are doing it in, from a good-hearted kind of place versus a really nasty kind of place.
No, because I've gotten both sides of it, so I can tell. I've also, some people will have a laugh about it, and I think it's funny as well. See this one, I was the goon drinking, rugby footy guy. Suddenly I'm going there speaking Portuguese and singing and dancing. But, then some people I could see, like when they had the girls were in the photo, suddenly, or why don't you speak English, or girlfriends of friends I'd gone to school with were I was like, please, get out of it. People didn't like the fact that I was doing well for myself, if you get what I mean. And,
I think they always get scared of that, right? And that it's almost, that's the dark side of the tall poppy syndrome. It's not even necessarily that you're flaunting it, but if they see that you're doing well in society or in life, quite often the first instant reaction is, how do I bring them back down, as opposed to how do I bring myself up?
Exactly. So I think it's got, I agree, it's got its good side, but then it's got a terrible side as well, which is reflected in Australian culture. But to be honest, I think it'd be a lot worse if we didn't have it.
So what do you think about Australian culture and language learning in general? When you went through school and everything, what was your experience like with that? Was there a lot of people learning foreign languages? Was it a nerdy thing to do or a cool thing to do? And what languages were they learning? Because I always get that question. Do Australians just learn, Indonesian? Because it's right there.
To be honest, so I was actually caught in that because I finished school, 8 years ago now. I was actually caught in that last generation of the classical French and German.
Yep.
Now, to be honest, they've lost their relevance for us. 50 years ago it was quite important. What's happened now is sort of my sister's just finished school is Spanish, Chinese. I think they're a lot more useful. Now that's become trendy, Despacito, that's taken. Before learning Spanish was like, trying to be bloody Don Juan, or are you going to put on a white shirt and play the guitar? It was a bit of and French was like, you're a fancy bugger. And to be honest, I was always a down-to-earth, fun kind of guy, but I remember I did high-level French at Sydney University, and it was a snobbish, posh thing to do.
Yep.
And I was the only guy who didn't rock up with a scarf and a beret every morning talking about how I did law arts. And to be honest, that deterred me. I quit after 2 years because that's not what language is about. It's not being able to, it's living a language, communicating. I didn't, and so I quit French for that reason. I didn't feel comfortable in that sort of environment. But I think that it's very weak, and a lot of people come up with the excuse of, learning a language is so hard. But we live in a place where there are a lot of foreigners, and if you go out of your way, it's very easy. It's just like learning a puzzle, learning a skill. It's just practice, but because people never practice, like, it's so hard. But it's not really, and I think now back when I was at school, it wasn't like the most popular thing, but one of the other big rugby hotshots also learnt French with me, so that sort of gave it a bit of status.
There's two of them now. We can't bully him.
You know what I mean? So it gave it, we did exchange together and everything. His mum was a language teacher, but I think now it's changed, and suddenly it's trendy now to be learning Chinese. I think people finally clicked and gone, hold up, it's actually pretty useful, pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. I always found it
10 years, I reckon.
Sorry?
I reckon it's definitely in the last 5 years at least changed a lot. It's suddenly a lot cooler. It's suddenly a useful, interesting, and a lot of people still go by that, I live in my own world. But I realize, even if you hang out with other cultures, if you don't speak other languages, you're very restricted, because it's more the cultural understanding. It's very easy to say, I understand these people will have dinner at such a time, whatever. But when you speak, you know what I mean? People, no, in China they do this. I understand. No, you don't. Whereas when you speak a language, you feel there's different grammar, different way of viewing things. Everything is different, and you see another world, and the way you view your own culture changes.
So did you have those moments with Brazilian Portuguese? Did that happen while you were in Australia learning the language, or did it happen, if it did happen, when you were in Brazil and you were like, oh my gosh, we do this?
No, it was already happening, because I remember it was a bit of a, to be honest, I grew up in that sort of GPS jock rugby world. And I just realized, and I was a terrible offender. I was getting smashed to passing out. I thought that was cool, because in our culture it's lionized. And I was one of the worst. I was a hero. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I started hanging out with Brazilians, and I did that, and they all looked at me going, what are you doing? I thought, hold up. And then I realized, why actually, and I know it sounds obvious to say it's not cool, but when that's what you've done for years, it is cool.
Well, when you're in that group, right? When you've got that group of people who are all sort of giving you a pat on the back for doing X, Y, Z, of course you're going to do it. But then as soon as you step out and you're like, oh wait, the rest of the world doesn't do this?
Yeah. And then I started hanging out with Brazilians, and I just realized, wow, it is actually so easy to have fun with the guitar, a good bunch of people. And I started realizing, I don't want to rag on my own mates, but I saw a lot of my friends, and I was like, you don't even compliment each other, talk to each other, and then suddenly you're talking about drugs.
Yeah.
Whereas Brazilians, you just get a bunch of Brazilians in a room, everyone's playing guitar, everyone's happy, laughing. At about midnight, everyone will start kissing each other and dancing. That is fantastic. And no one's getting smashed. No one's passing out, vomiting. No one's fighting. Whereas I go out with my Aussie mates sometimes, and there's no vibe. and people, not all of them, as I said, but people are just dead, and they're like, oh, yeah, man, so what are we getting on tonight? And I just think, wow, how was your week? Like, how are you? You know, what have you been doing? No one's got any stories. Yep. Obviously, this is years of a bit of mix of frustration, different sort of views. This has just been years of analysing. And I look at people and I'm just like, geez, man, how can you walk around so smashed and think that's cool?
Man, everyone needs to be learning Portuguese or Spanish, right? They just need to get a dose of that. 20 or so years of getting smashed. You know, I can't erase my whole, you know, it's always going to be with me, that, like, unable to control the drink sometimes. But I know now, and not just drinking, it's just different ways of enjoying ourselves and different ways of viewing things and personal space. Yeah. What was that like, personal space-wise? Because I always have that thing of when I go to Melbourne, and it's probably going to come off bad, but I feel like Chinese people don't have the same appreciation for personal space. And I can imagine it's because they come from big cities where there are loads of people and they don't have a problem with bumping into people. Whereas I have this sort of anal retentive attitude of if I see people near me, I make a concerted effort to avoid ever touching them, or, you know, you get around them and stuff. Were there any things like that?
Some culture sprawl along the street, that is Spanish included. That was shocking. It's like, can you walk a bit faster, please, or go to the left?
Yeah. We're going on a mission. I'm going home. Get out of my way.
Yeah, I was like, like, how can you take up? But anyways, that's another story. What I noticed was, I think maybe because my mum comes from a European immigrant family, she was born in the country, and my dad's not from Sydney, that I was probably a bit warmer than the average Sydney-sider. Yep. And I came from a big sort of hugging family, and, you know, my mum was one of 12, and I think that's sort of...
Holy moly.
Strong, yeah, big country, you know, there was no TV. And, you know, that's the joke. And what I noticed was... I always felt a bit, people always said at school I was a bit different, but then when I started hanging out with Brazilians, I just clicked because I knew that was me. Hugging. Yep. I always like to give people a hug, a pat on the back. And I noticed that when I went back to uni, for example, I remember when I was finishing, I remember this so clearly. I was talking to this girl just on graduation day. And for me, I was an appropriate distance talking to her, but she was backing away. So I was like, hold up. Geez, like, how can you, and I'm not going to lie, my first thought was, how can you be so cold? Like, it's a graduation day, give me a hug. And I wasn't even touching, I would have been like a good 30 centimeters just talking, and she was back, and I thought, hold up, what's going on with me?
It must be so weird having to juggle those two things. It's almost like being pulled out of the Matrix, right? And you've suddenly got to be like, how do I tackle with these different cultural things and have to worry about juggling this in my brain every time I meet someone from Australia versus Brazil?
I noticed that, and like, I remember one time at uni as well, nearly started a fight. I met these Chinese people, and at the end I like tried to give one of the girls a kiss on the cheek to say goodbye. Yep. And she flipped out, and her boyfriend came, and I was like, we've just been talking for 2 hours. I gave you a goodbye kiss on the cheek. Whereas, you know, even Australia, that's not, you know, like if you've made good friendship with you, and they were like, whoa, 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 and I went, whoa. And then sometimes, but now I think I'm sharp enough to sort of pick up on it, but I still, when I get a bit lazy, I just slip in. But I'm naturally a sort of caloroso or warm kind of guy. I don't like it when people take too long to become friendly. I think life's too short. I don't want to be 50 by the time I'm going to be friends with you.
Man, I have a short story for you with regards to that. Kel and I were out walking around this lake, and we kept seeing the same bloke. He's an Australian bloke who'd been to Brazil, and so we would chat to him every time we'd see him every few days there. And I remember after like the third time he'd seen us, and he was like, his house was right there, so he'd always be like, "G'day," or he'd talk to us over his fence. And I remember Kel getting home being like, why hasn't this guy asked us over for lunch yet? In Brazil, we'd be practically living at his house, having like food with him every day. We see him all the time, and he doesn't invite us in. And I was like, what are you talking about?
It is. No, I agree with you. I mean, to be honest now, obviously there's two sides, but a lot of people say, well, what I noticed was Melbourne people are a lot friendlier than Sydney people.
See, I don't have that experience yet, that deep experience. I know a lot of Melburnians. I've met some Sydneyans, but I don't know. Have you noticed that when you've come down here, or is that through just meeting them?
I've only spent a couple of weeks in Melbourne here and there, but I spent a week there last year. I was amazed. I don't want to, but in Sydney it's a very cliquey. You stick up with the mates. You stick with the mates you grew up in, or sport, or like that's it. Yep. You know, even at uni, I was the most social, hardly made any friends, and I did arts. Whereas I went to Melbourne for a week. And I just went to the restaurant. I was talking to like the waitresses and the waiters, and suddenly we were all exchanging numbers and hanging. I was like, what? And this was the whole week in Melbourne. Everyone was just so down to earth, so easy to make. And I thought, hold up, And apparently it's more so in Brisbane, but I just couldn't believe it. Whereas Sydney, they just look at you like, And I struggle with Brazilians that start like showing emotion. I don't want to speak badly because I know in Sydney, the world I grew up in was like, show too much emotion or you're too keen to meet someone. Everyone thinks there's something wrong with you.
This guy's a weirdo.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, what's wrong with this guy's like, obviously got no friends or whatever. And then I couldn't imagine my life now when I hang out with some of my mates from back in the, I can't imagine. I'm like, how can you be so cold with, I have known you for 10 years. How can you not give me a hug when you see me? You know what I mean? Like, I just look at them, I'm like, wow, how can you all be excited to like have a friend? People out there, a lot of people don't have friends. And I don't know, I personally get. But at the same time, I don't like I don't like bullshit friendships.
Go for it.
Hey man, well, you don't care. It's like, don't kid me.
Yeah.
It can be like this, I know I'm not your friend, but you can at least, hey, how you going? Like, instead of just,
you can see it in their eyes, right? You can see when they're giving you the BS and they're looking through you and then you're just like,
no, please, just be gentle. Like, you don't have to be my good mate. You can say, hey, how you going? I don't mind that. And that happens a lot with Brazilians, but most of the time they're great. And sometimes they'll try a lot of Brazilians say that, it's just in Brazilian culture that they're a bit like sly. Whereas it's every culture, but Aussies are just a bit better at hiding it, I think. Whereas a lot of Brazilians will pop me up and be like, hey bro, how you going? And I think, here we go. When it's because I haven't spoken in 6 months and I know. And then suddenly without a please or a thank you, I get can you correct this for me? Yeah. I think, sorry. And I used to help because I felt bad. I was a nice guy. Now I just sort of click, ignore. You know, I was like, if you said please or sorry, disturb you, sure. So I'm very serious. I can't get rid of that Aussie side. If you don't say please and thank you with me, you're getting nothing.
I know, it's a bit like that at times, and I've had that with some mates from high school where there's ones you've kept up with. I've been out of high school now 12 years. There's ones you keep up with and you chat to all the time, and then there's others that are like, hey man, how's it going? Can you do this for me? And you're like, dude, I haven't spoken to you in 3 years. Could you at least say g'day before you start asking for favors?
Yeah, I'm just like, I know you want something, but just a bit of courtesy. I personally, it's weird. As much as I did go to rugby school where it's sort of like you had to pay each other out, I still get offended. That gets through the thick skin, that sort of stuff. And when Brazilians do to me, I get even madder.
Well, I think it's just Australians that, most people just don't like BS, right? There's sort of, and I think the good thing about Australians is, at least for most of them, they're not afraid to call it out. So I think there's a lot of cultures out there where you can get away with being kind of cold or doing things, and it's kind of like culturally inappropriate to address someone who's done that. I noticed that in a lot of, I found it weird because I remember there was this happens, every now and then with every culture, but a few times some Brazilians have been a bit lazy or they've like sent a message and not responded and been like, why didn't you respond to my message? And I think, hold up, you didn't respond. And I called them, I said, look, that's rubbish. Shut up. And the person goes, whoa, how dare you? And I'm like, mate, you're in the wrong. And they act as if I'm in the wrong for getting angry. Yeah. And I think, no, it doesn't work like that. And then they do the dramatic, oh man, like you didn't even get so angry. And I think, well, like, how dare you? Don't play the victim with me. You'll have to pull out your glove and slap them in the face and challenge them to a duel or something.
So I'm pretty even my girlfriend says I'm pretty stubborn. Like if someone slights me, if I don't get an apology, they're not my friend again. And I remember every time, even after 10 drinks, I'll remember your face. Don't you dare.
And that's it. It's like, oh, sorry for having standards. It's not.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I've learned now. But as she's taught me, she's like, you've got to stop worrying about stupid stuff. If someone annoys you, just bugger off instead of giving them a hug. Yeah, and that's something I'm learning of. But I just, most of the time I have an absolute ball.
Oh man, so Ozueiros, before we finish up, Ozueiros Gringos, how did that begin? And tell me about it. What's the goal?
Okay, so, Simon was at the end of 2017. Simon was at my house. One thing I lack personally is a bit of drive sometimes, creative, spontaneous, where Simon had the drive. He said, why don't we do videos? And obviously, to use the word, he said, and at first I was a bit reluctant, and he said, come on, Hugo, don't be a pussy. And that was that tipped me over the edge. And I went, all right, you buzz. Like, all right, if you're going to go there. And then we were a real success for about 6 months. And then what happened was, obviously, I went overseas. Simon got into uni. And so we've been chatting recently, and he said, look, I need a break. And I said, that's fair enough. So we're just sort of working out what we're going to do from now. And obviously the aim was just to educate, have a lot of fun, take the piss, just English learning, Aussie culture with a good sense of humor. No, because you see a lot of those boring old dudes on YouTube and think, geez, like shoot me in the head now. Whereas we were trying to make it like younger, fun, we were quite successful. So we're just sort of planning the next steps. And, obviously it's been a ball. Simon and I are still in contact all the time. And, we'll just see what happens. But obviously the next video was I don't know, I hope Simon's involved with me, but I want to do one on Vegemite because Brazilians take the piss. I say, bugger off, sorry. Better than your cheese bread. Like, yeah.
How would you compare it to cheese bread?
Oh, it's just like... At least
could you have it with cheese bread?
Sorry?
Could you have it with cheese bread?
I did, and it tasted nice. Whereas cheese bread and so on, sorry, most overrated thing in the world.
Don't say that to my wife.
Oh, is she from Guinness?
No, she's from Marin.
Oh, no, wow, North, yeah.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Saul is.
God, she'd have a funny accent now.
Well, I've got it as well, apparently. But yeah, doing all the falach and that sort of stuff.
Wow, yeah. So the plan is obviously we're going to 2K19 now. I've got some big ideas. Hopefully Simon's on board. But yeah, we really killed it last year. We had an absolute ball, and yeah, we were living it. We got on SBS radio. We were the talk of the town, and it was just so much fun educating. We were in it for good purposes, to educate, to have a bit of fun, and we became best mates through it. And Simon was coming over like twice a week. We're always dancing funk videos, grabbing my chickens.
Yeah, I saw that. So you guys are sitting down in front of the camera with like dogs on your laps or chickens. I was like, what the hell are these guys doing holding chickens? I'm like,
so it was a lot of, it's been a lot of fun. I'm keen to sort of replicate that this year. So yeah, no. What about you? Sorry, I was about to call you Kel. What are you? That's the name you've been saying.
That's it.
What are your plans with your Portuguese?
Oh, man. I want to get to a better level, but I think I just need to talk more. And again, it's one of those things where I get stuck in the same rut. So I talk about the same stuff all the time with Kel. I have no issues with that, but it's one of those things of getting out of your comfort zone. So that's always what I'm telling listeners. It's just keep finding ways to expand. And the hardest thing for me, I think, with languages in particular is that initially it's freaking hard. And then you get really good. You kind of get competent at something and you're like, yes, this feels good. And you just want to stick there because it's like suddenly I'm good at this and you forget, okay, I have to keep expanding, keep growing, right? Like with jiu-jitsu, I remember being the beginner and you're this white belt who everyone smashes because you have to fight people every day.
Yeah.
And then after a few months, you start submitting other people and dominating a little bit. There's suddenly a crowd below you. And you'll be like, I'll just fight the white belts. Nah. All the other guys, I'll just fight the white belts. We're all good. Thanks, man. Next time. And then you're like, I can't do that. You got to remember.
It doesn't work like that.
Exactly. You don't level up.
And are you are you into the Brazilian music?
Not as much. I need to get into it. I just haven't been listening to music.
Have you tried Step That Initial before, or is it just me?
I know of it. Like, Kel plays stuff all the time, but she kind of goes through just everything. But, who is she?
Yeah, I'm full on, absolutely. It's got to be romantic country music, and that's just it's the most popular style in Brazil. I won't go on about it. Obviously, I'm not here to, but
the music is really good. I find it really interesting. And there's like a few of these artists. One of my friend's husbands is a producer for some Brazilian artists. I've forgotten what his name is, Luan or whatever it is. There's a big guy over there and they're always showing me photos and playing music and I'm just like, yeah, cool. Like, I don't know.
Find a few. But yeah, no, what kind of it's been a pleasure. Have you got Instagram or Facebook or anything like that?
That's it. I've got it. Man, who's doing this interview? You should be the one that's showing me all the stuff. So where can people find out more about you, dude? If they're Brazilians and they're wanting to learn more English, where can they find out more?
Ozueiros Gringos on Facebook or Hugo Groom, Instagram, Simon Gurney. So we've got two separate Instagrams, personal Instagrams and Ozueiros Gringos, or our Facebooks. Also, our personal Facebooks also have videos, but Ozueiros Gringos main page, we're about to put some life back into it, rekindle it.
Yeah, brilliant.
And then our personal Instagrams with tips, a lot of Zoeira. We love joking around, dancing videos, especially on mine. I've got a lot of me, obviously I've got a girlfriend now, so I'm not doing sensual dancing anymore, but I'm cooking. You know what I mean? I've become like a home.
I love that aspect of it. And I think that's what my listeners, even if you guys, you guys will probably find it a little harder if you don't speak any Portuguese. You'll probably need a little bit to follow the videos. But for any of the Brazilian listeners, if you want to see, just an Australian and learn about their life and everything in their day-to-day life with vlogs and stuff, definitely check out Hugo and Simon's channel. Are you going to get on YouTube and do some videos on there as well in this coming year?
We put a few on YouTube, but I've got a couple myself from back in the day. One that went viral that initially got me started was Brazilian speaking English it's in Portuguese, but brasileiro falando inglês no supermercado, Brazilian speaking English in supermarket.
And that's where I saw you the first time, I think.
That one, yeah, it was like 5 years ago. It was meant to be a piss take. I just did it with my brother. We were just at Coles. And I said, hey,
that didn't even click. That didn't even click until just now. And then I'm like, I remember the Australian dude speaking Portuguese in the supermarket walking around.
And then suddenly that one just explode overnight. I became a semi-celebrity, and that on Facebook, this Brazilian bloody company stole my video actually, but it got 100,000 hits. Well, they didn't reference me properly.
They just copy pasted it, did they?
Yeah, I was like, are you serious? But they got 100,000 hits on Facebook, and on YouTube it's got like 50,000. So it was whoa, that was what kicked me off. So I'm keen to get back in it because I definitely see potential. But obviously, as you know, running a blog, running anything is a lot of work, and so getting into it, and I'm really excited for this year. This is a big year, so now obviously focus different. I'm not a single guy anymore, but I'm focused on cooking videos, language. You know what I mean? Obviously, the girlfriend will be watching closely, but I'm excited. Yeah.
Awesome, Hugo, man. Well, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Pete. The pleasure was all mine. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.